Story 1. Primus is one of my favorite bands. I would beg him to come to a concert with me. One year, he agreed. We had a blast dancing, huge smiles on our faces. The next year, another tour was announced on the radio. I look at him and say, "Oh, we should go." He says no. I asked why, since we had so much fun last time. He said it's because he found it made me too happy. It may seem silly, but it was maybe the cruelest thing someone has said to me. Story 2. It was the death of 1,000 slights. The actual deal breaker was coming home from work, he was unemployed, and finding him sleeping on the couch while our 9-month-old daughter was wailing and crying, sitting in a very many hours soiled diaper. The house was a mess. Our 3-year-old had literally torn the place apart, and he did not pick up one thing. I walked into the house, heard the baby, and went to change and console her, her eyes red and puffy with tears. I went downstairs and asked my husband what was going on, and he yelled at me and told me he was tired. He had stayed up all night playing video games. We separated shortly after that. I never let him be alone with the children again. Story 3. We were sitting in a parent-teacher conference and he was trying to flirt with the teacher. It just clicked that he wasn't charming or funny. He was just sleazy. In that moment, I saw what all my friends and family saw. Story 4. He slammed on the brakes while driving, causing my seat belt to lock as I flew forward. He did it a second time, and I accused him of doing it on purpose. He got the smirk on his face and admitted that the first time was necessary, but he saw that it hurt me and wanted to do it again. He proceeded to drive erratically afterward. That day killed our relationship. Story 5. He touched my friend inappropriately in the back of an Uber and assumed she didn't realize it because she was drunk. When we noticed what he was doing, he tried to make a joke of it. Not funny, dude. Story 6. He was flaky as can be. He could show up on time for work or class, but never our dates. He would take his friends' calls, but never mine. He could text back in a timely manner when he initiated the conversation, but never the other way around. Story 7. Resentment. I moved to the other side of the planet for him. He wouldn't move to a town an hour away from me. I got a second job, working in a bar, to have social time because I moved away from all my family and friends, and he wouldn't let me work one night a week without constant. "When will you be home? Are you done yet?" And, "I'm just going to go to bed." I guess messages. I begged him to take on a share, not even half, just some of the housework and cleaning. He responded by leaving his dirty dishes from dinner sitting on the bench directly on top of the open and empty dishwasher. In the end, I resented that I had an emotionally manipulative child who wanted what he wanted the way he wanted it rather than an adult partner. Story 8. He had an image in his head of who he expected me to be and kept trying to mold me into his imaginary dream girl. Do not get with someone if your goal is to change them. Story 9. Slammed me into a door while 7 months pregnant in front of our 1-year-old, telling me he would smile if he had the privilege to smash my head into the wall and then take our 1-year-old and run. I left our apartment that day and eventually went homeless getting away from him. It took me a while and a move out of state to truly stop his behavior towards me. He wants nothing to do with the kids he helped make and hasn't been in the picture since that day. My now husband, who would cry if I killed a spider because he likes them, is all my kids know as Dad. They have a beautiful relationship, and we are truly at peace and happy. Story 10. My ex-wife adored my dog and spent so much time with her out on runs and hikes and all through the neighborhood while I was recovering from knee surgery. Then one day, she stopped paying any attention whatsoever to the dog, like a switch was turned off. Not even bothering to feed the poor thing breakfast on days when I had to teach an early class. The dog was so confused and sad her favorite person suddenly changed so drastically. Seeing my dog's anguish made me realize that she was checked out of our entire relationship, and I'd been in denial. This story has a happy ending. I'm remarried now, and my wife and I spoil our older dog rotten. She's even got a younger dog to boss around and play face-bitey with. Story 11. My brother killed himself, and 3 weeks after, my ex-wife said, "At a certain point, it's time to man up and get over it." Called a lawyer the next day. Story 12. She was rich. Very, very rich. She would shop for herself constantly and spend thousands of dollars per trip without looking at price tags. She would go to dinners regularly, spending $800 to $900 like it was nothing. It was her money, not a problem for me. But then her young, mostly healthy dog had a lump that needed to be removed, and she was considering putting it down because she didn't want to pay for the surgery. I didn't just lose feelings for her. I instantly felt like I hated her. I broke up with her the day after this conversation and was very direct with my reason why. She ended up giving the dog to a family member when she moved away shortly after, and as far as I know, she hasn't had a pet since. Good. I wouldn't want to have kids with someone with such terrible priorities and values. Story 13. Constant white lies among lies even when confronted with cold hard evidence. Latest. Commenting on pictures and videos of 18-year-old girls, telling them they're very attractive, saying he would cheat on me with them and to direct message him. He denied it even when I was showing him the evidence until he couldn't any longer. Then he said he doesn't remember doing it. He's 36 years old. I dread to think about what he looks at and says on other platforms. Story 14. I do not remember what the argument was about anymore, but we got pretty heated, and she said, "Why would you think I could ever love you?" Bam. Over right there. Story 15. He took me to the Cheesecake Factory and then to our usual hookup spot. Except I didn't want it that night, and he said, "But I paid for dinner." I never spoke to him again. Completely ghosted after he took me home. He tried adding me on Instagram this year. Declined. Story 16. He was never a very involved parent. One day, he made it to our daughter's soccer game. A rare occurrence for him. Then he promptly left to another area of the park because he saw a few of his basketball friends and missed the whole thing. There were a lot of other issues that occurred, but that was definitely the moment of realizing he really doesn't care. He's someone else's problem now. Story 17. I thought my ex and I had been hiding our marital challenges from our daughter perfectly. But then one day when some unpleasant tension started, our 4-year-old daughter covered her ears and said, "No fighting." At that moment, I realized divorce would be better for the child than toughing it out for the next 14 years. Story 18. I love way too hard. The first time she cheated on me, I took her back. I knew it was wrong, but I still loved her. She was the first person I had ever truly loved, and I sort of forgave her. The second time was what really did it for me. Emotionally and most likely physically as well. She was gaslighting me and hiding things from me, which made me feel like a nuisance. It was also easy for her since she moved away. She broke up with me and tried to get back with me, but I wasn't having it. I knew something was off, and I was right. She ended up getting together with the guy she was cheating on me with shortly after, and it destroyed me emotionally and a little bit mentally. Story 19. Okay, not as severe as others on here, but years and years of being the only one to take care of the household, though we both work, and realizing it's like being married to a child. And literally picking up his messes that he doesn't clean up. I already have 3 children, don't need another one. I need a partner. Story 20. We were talking on the phone about fictional characters. I happened to say that I thought this particular character was gay, just basically talking about the show, what might happen, clues and all. He got really offended for no reason in a very homophobic way. Never saw a glimpse of his views on that subject in 2 years, but it did the job in a second. The audible disgust in his sentence did it all by itself actually. Story 21. Him being 16 years older than me and me having to be his father, essentially. I made all the money, did all the chores, made all the food, did all the yard work, and so on. He is the laziest person I have ever met. Story 22. I dated a guy years ago who would often do the wallet tap when we went out. I knew I was earning a bit more than him and didn't mind paying for most of our drinks, food, and activities because I really felt we had a great connection. Then one afternoon, he invited me over. We had a great time, and afterwards, he began cooking. I asked him what he was making, and he said an early dinner, but sorry, there really won't be enough for 2. So I watched him cook, then sat watching as he ate his meal. He didn't blink or offer a bite. All the while, I thought, this guy is going to flip out when he realizes this is the last time we ever speak. We had dated for 8 months, and after that day, I never did see him again. Story 23. recognizing that he wasn't just mean. He chose to be mean to me. He chose to abuse me. He chose to belittle me, to put me down. He chose to cheat. He chose to do it all. He never considered me. 25 years of never being considered. Took me long enough. Story 24. When he told me I was hard to love and tried fake breaking up with me, then proceeded to tell me he was glad I was raped and I deserved it when I wouldn't take him back. That was the final bullet in a long line of instances which slowly contributed to me losing all feelings. Story 25. Right now it's his depression, which feels awful because I also have bouts of depression, but this one is bad. He's snappy and grumpy all the time. I'm walking on eggshells constantly. We don't talk, we don't have sex, we barely hang out once a week, and everything feels forced. But mostly, it's that we're just not connecting. In the past, he's been so loving and wonderful. I know he'll pull out of this pit and be the person I fell in love with again, but I don't know if I can hold on that long. Story 26. Months of no intimacy or dates. Never wanted to hang out or spend time together. I was her last priority while always trying to make her my first. So honestly, I got super turned off and left the relationship. Story 27. She was telling me the story of how she broke up with her ex-boyfriend and cheated on him with his best friend. Then she tried to rationalize by saying she did it because her ex-boyfriend was too stupid for her and she never respected him. I called her a derogatory term, which I shouldn't have done, I admit, and after some back and forth, she then proceeded to scream at me about how she was cheating on me too and how stupid I was for not seeing it. The clarity after the shock was astounding though. I was completely emotionless towards her. Every single feeling was gone, and only disgust remained. Story 28. When they said that if I were a dog, they would have shot me already, it made me take a step back and take a long look at the entire history of emotional abuse throughout the relationship, which I had always refused to fully identify. Story 29. Cancer runs in my family. I went to a doctor appointment and they found a lump, so I had to go to a special cancer screening place beyond just a normal mammogram. I was so scared. The day of the appointment, my husband didn't say a word. When he got home, he didn't ask me anything about how it went. Days later, I brought it up when I got my results, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I totally forgot about that. We had problems before, but that literally killed any love I had left." I asked for a separation 6 months after that, and we eventually divorced. Story 30. We spent a weekend with his friends. They were very generous and kind while he was incredibly stingy toward them the whole time, despite them driving us all around town so we could drink. I gave one of his friends money for gas, and later my significant other at the time asked for it back. I repaid the friend later when my significant other wasn't paying attention. Major turnoff. I broke up with him when the weekend was over. How you treat your friends says a lot about you. Story 31. After years of dealing with his financial abuse, mental abuse, and his growing alcoholism, it was when he beat me while I was driving us from an event we took our kids to for one of their birthdays. He broke my glasses off my face. There was blood everywhere. He was drunk and looking to fight anyone. He began to just verbally abuse me, and I turned the radio up so the kids wouldn't hear him clearly. He lost it. One child, the one seated behind him, tried to put their arms around him to stop him. He bit our child in his drunken rage. I pulled the car over, yanked the keys out, and started pushing him away. His brother, who followed behind us, saw this, literally yanked the door open, and tore him off of me. We left in the car, the kids and I. Sadly, it took a few more years to leave, but we got out and are incredibly happy now. But that incident was when I died inside, and I lived that way until I knew I would never have the means to leave. I just had to leave and play it by ear until we were finally safe and stable. Story 32. She always wanted hugs from me. Not once did she ever hug me back. I found out a good friend died 1.5 years after he died by calling him. The number was disconnected. I Googled him and found the obituary. He started sobbing. He was a great man. She saw me, patted me on the back, and walked away. We are getting divorced. Forget her. Story 33. When he came to my house after work one weekend, when I only saw him on weekends, he didn't even really look at me or our toddler before sitting down on the couch and turning on the game. Nothing new there. But then, after the kids were asleep, I dropped all my clothing on the floor in front of him and walked to the shower and got an "I'll be there in a minute" response. He never showed up and was still on the couch playing when I got out. I stood there for a minute, and then he finally looked up at my angry face, and you could see the look of horror come across his as it dawned on him what he'd just done. I told him to get out. He broke down so hard I took him back the next week, and a week after that, he was right back at it. He came in after work, went straight to his game, and didn't even notice I was all dressed up for the date he was supposed to be bringing me on, which he totally forgot about. And no, he doesn't have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. One of my sons and my current fiance all do, and this was not that. This was self-centered complacency and neglectfulness, which had been growing worse for years regardless of my relaying countless times that it was very hurtful. I dumped him again for good after that. He had a new woman in 2 weeks. Tell a girl you didn't really love her without telling her.